Starting the page.
So the quiz next week will start on page 15 with chapter 11. So just this chapter that we've been working on, Judah alone amid the international power. So the quiz will begin there. And the main things to keep in mind in this chapter are definitely King Hezekiah and his reform movement. And we talked about what did Hezekiah especially strengthen and build up and made greater. The city of Jerusalem. He built a massive new wall. And also along with that, what did he really bring? What did he dig out and build? Yeah, he built those water tunnels to make Jerusalem a strong fortification when it was under siege. So that's page 15 and 16. And we also did look at the map where he defeated cities, the cities of the Philistines on the plain there. That's number 2. And
map number is that?
That's map number 72. Okay, then we talked about the Assyrian siege on Jerusalem during the reign of Hezekiah. That battle is referred to in Kings, Chronicles, and Isaiah. And who was the Assyrian king who led that battle? Sennacherib. He's throughout the scripture. And what was the city through which they attacked Jerusalem? What was the siege city? Number 3 would be that city, and that city will also come up again. That's on map 74 now. If you go to map 74, keep definitely Lachish in mind. And we talked about these cities on the Shephelah, the lowlands, before you get into the hill country, that those cities were protector cities really for Jerusalem. So the different kings would strengthen those cities in that Shephelah, in the lower lying regions, in order to protect ultimately Jerusalem. And so what these kings would do, come down from Babylon, or in Sennacherib's case, Assyria, they will come down the highway, the international coastal highway, and then they would attack Jerusalem through those cities on the Shephelah. And the key city there is Lachish. What king was carried away to Babylon and there repented of his sin? Manasseh. We talked about him. That's on page 17. Who was the Assyrian general? Going back to page 16, actually. Who was the Assyrian general who led that siege? General for Rabshakeh, or for Sennacherib was Rabshakeh. Okay? So if you could also keep that in mind. And then
so there's only one city that we have to remember for Shephelah.
That is the key city. The only other city mentioned in the text of scripture that I know of that was taken, although our book talks about how many cities does our book say were actually taken by Sennacherib, and then he sieged Jerusalem. He tried to get that to fall, but he failed. But how many cities did he take before that? 46. But the only city that is specifically mentioned is Libnah and also Lachish. So you should know all that. Yeah,
just the
good.
2.
It's good. I
Not
brought out more
46.
stuff. Okay, now, here's a good question. What prophetic book speaks about the
Nahum.
Ashurbanipal's war against Egypt? And that would be, And Nahum, you see where Nahum 3, 8 through 10 is mentioned there. And the campaign of Ashurbanipal down to No Aman, the green line on map 75. So we talked about that. I have a star by Nahum 3, 8 through 10, map 75. And when did Assyria finally fall? Then Assyria went to supremacy, but then they fell to Babylon in when? 612. So we talked a lot about that. And what prophetic book is really written about the destruction of the Assyrian Empire and the Syrian capital, Nineveh? That would be the book of Nahum. So that's there. You have that. Starred. 612, that's one of the key dates. Oh, and we did say, we are doing a little dates here. So just try to keep some dates in your mind. What are the key dates here?
722.
722, what happened? Okay, the northern kingdom of Syria. Syria defeated the northern kingdom of Israel, 722. What's another date?
627.
No, 701. 701. I have that. Do you have that starred on page 16? That was getting back to that siege of Sennacherib against. Okay, that was in 701. So that was going toward the height of the Assyrian Empire around then, but by 612, it was gone. And Babylon now rises to power after Assyria. Okay, so then that final battle where Babylon then becomes the dominant power in the world, right after that battle, Nebuchadnezzar is crowned king as well. That was the battle of, top of page 18, Karshemish. That's in the Bible also with verse. That key battle. So you should know that. And how did Josiah die? King Josiah.
He was killed by King Necho.
King Necho of who?
Egypt.
Of Egypt. Where was King Necho going? He was going to the battle of Karshemish. He was heading there. He didn't want to fight Josiah and Judah. He said, no, don't mess with me right now. I've got more important things on my mind. But Josiah didn't listen to him, came out, King Necho killed Josiah. Sad thing. Okay, so we talked a little bit about that. And then also why Josiah may have thought that was a good strategy for him at that time to go out and fight King Necho. All right, so I think that's about right where we are, and we'll pick it up right there. We're on page 18 in our notes. Is that correct?
After just a question, and for Hezekiah preparation for war, you said he built a massive new wall in Jerusalem and expanded westward. Is there any place for the westward, or which country was that, or just in general?
No, he just expanded the city westward. If you look at the map,
okay.
It wasn't in any. If you look at the map on page 73, you'll see that Hezekiah actually more than doubled the size of the city of Jerusalem by extending that wall just westward within Judah. Okay, so let's go to the Neo-Babylon Empire now, the last of the kings of Judah. So letter A, we see Judah's dilemma. Now, this is a very important statement here. If you look at if you look at your book, top of page 156, what does it say there? In the first paragraph, Judah now was caught between what? Two unequal powers. You might want to mark that in your book right there. It's caught between two unequal powers. And what were those unequal powers? Egypt and Babylon. Now, why does it call them unequal powers? Who was stronger? Babylon. So unequal in that Babylon at this point now was much stronger than Egypt. But what happens now? If you now look in your Bible, go to 2 Kings chapter number 23. So it says Judah's caught between two unequal powers because once Josiah dies, who steps in to be the kingmaker for Judah? And so showing Judah's weakness, who initially steps in 2 Kings, look please at verse 34, who makes the next king of Judah?
What chapter?
2 Kings chapter 23, verse 34. We're deep down into it now. 2 Kings chapter 23.
Verse what?
Verse 34. Who makes the next king? Carrie?
Is it Eliakim?
2 Kings chapter 23, verse 34. Who? No. No. Who? But who makes him the king? That's it. The Pharaoh of Egypt is the kingmaker. He's the one making the decision on who is going to be the next king. So in other words, they're trying to exert authority over the kingdom of Judah. And again, it's all about money. It's all about controlling these trade routes and so forth, moving through that area and then moving out into the Fertile Crescent. So Pharaoh Necho declares that Eliakim is going to be the king, and he even changed his name to Jehoiakim. Okay, so then, as Babylon begins a siege upon Judah in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, Jehoiakim, who had been made king, now just think about this, he had been made king by Egypt, but what does now Jehoiakim, what is he now forced to do? In 2 Kings chapter 24, verse 1.
Become a servant.
Vassal.
He became a vassal nation. He became the servant. So when it says he became the servant, guess what? He had to pay off. He had to pay money, if you will. He had to pay tribute, tax money to Nebuchadnezzar in order to keep him away from attacking him. But then by rebelling against him, though, Nebuchadnezzar now is going to begin his sieges upon Judah. So Judah is caught between these two unequal powers, and the two unequal powers again are, and the blank there for letter A is Egypt and Babylon. So after the death of Josiah, Egypt removed the king the people placed on the throne, as we just talked about, for a king who would be loyal to Egypt. That was Jehoiakim. And as we mentioned already, the Battle of Carchemish comes in. He's preaching at this time, and he's telling the kings of Judah to do what? Submit to who? Not to Egypt, but to who? Babylon. But the kings of Judah, they feel more loyalty to the kings of Egypt for whatever reason. But Jeremiah is saying, submit to Babylon and you'll have peace. But they don't listen, of course, to Jeremiah. So the kings of the Babylonians, or Nebuchadnezzar, continues to come. And there's three major sieges he will level against the kingdom of Judah and the city of Jerusalem. So number 3 at the bottom of page 18 then is who is, in the meanwhile, as Babylon is raising the power, who's constantly promoting rebellion and promising help to the kings of Judah. Hey, I'll help you if Babylon comes against you. Who do you think's in there again? Egypt, exactly. Egypt was constantly promoting rebellion against Babylon by promising support. Now, I'm a bit confused by your book, Frank, on page number 156, where it says the first campaign against Jerusalem. And I read that little section there, and it's talking about, I don't know which campaign, because it ends with the first deportation in 597, which that wasn't the first deportation, that was actually the second deportation. So I'm a little confused by this. So your notes are a little confusing too, because I'm following your book and your notes. So put this somewhere on the side and look at your map, because your map actually makes it clear. On page 155, you go to map 78. How many campaigns does that map say there were? Right up here, right in this box. Boom, boom, boom. There were 3 campaigns. So the first campaign was when?
604.
604. Okay. So you might want to put that, it's not in your notes, but somewhere. So the first campaign and deportation was actually in 604. Who can read Daniel chapter 1, verse 1? Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. Who can get that verse? And right in this first campaign of Nebuchadnezzar in 604, Daniel was taken into captivity. Daniel. Okay, and who's got Daniel chapter 1, verse 1? Who's got that? Ruth?
In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, entered Jerusalem and besieged it.
Okay, so in the third year, around 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem, and that's when Daniel is taken into captivity. So that's in the scripture in Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. So Daniel was the first major prophet then taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. So the second campaign of Nebuchadnezzar, according to our book here, was when?
598.
598 to 597. And you can write somewhere along the side there, Ezekiel was taken into captivity in this deportation. Okay, so if you look as well, we're still kind of in 2 Kings. Are you still with me in 2 Kings? And we just mentioned how Jehoiakim was the king of the first deportation in chapter 24, where he became a servant to Nebuchadnezzar, but he rebelled against him. Now look in chapter 24, look at verse 2, please. Actually, look at 2 Kings chapter 24, verse 2. And it says here that the Lord sent against him bands of the Chaldees. And who are Chaldees? Babylonians. And bands of the Syrians. Bands of the Moabites. Now, are you getting a picture of where Moabites are coming from? Right? From the eastern side of the Jordan River. Bands of the children of Ammon, and sent them against Judah to destroy it, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by his servants, the prophets. So in your notes there, that's number 1, bands of the troops of the Syrians and Moabites and Ammonites attack Judah. And that's the time again in 604, 605 time that Daniel is taken. And there's a box here, I think. No, there's not. Okay. So I wanted to bring that out. That's in the scripture. So the second deportation took place 597, which included who did I say what prophet was part of that second? All right. So now we come to the end of Judah and Jerusalem. As we come to the end, who is the king of Judah? Zedekiah. Zedekiah. And that's, let's see here. Zedekiah is mentioned in 2 Kings 24:18, and then down. And then if you look in 2 Kings 25, it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, so it was in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign. He reigned 11 years, so it was going to be a 2-year siege. It says, Nebuchadnezzar came and his host against Jerusalem, and they built forts against it. The city was besieged until the 11th year of Zedekiah. So Zedekiah was named king. His reign lasted 11 years. He continually rebelled against Babylon. That's throughout the book of Jeremiah. and against the consistent counsel of Jeremiah. Now, where was Zedekiah taken when the city fell? Verse 6, 2 Kings 25, verse 6. Where was Zedekiah taken? Riblah. Okay, now let's find this on the map. Page number 78, map 78. And it's the white box at the very top of the map up here. That's Riblah. And that's actually, this Riblah is going to continue to come up for the place where it's like where they take the deposed kings, where all good kings died, I think. They took them there. There was some kind of a prison house for them, but he took Zedekiah. They slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. Now, Zedekiah had so many chances to repent. God was so patient and merciful to him as well as to the nation. But he did not listen. But look at how it ended for him. He slew his sons before his eyes, and then plucked his eyes out. What a memory to have for the rest of your life. The last thing you see. That's pretty deep. He bound him with fetters, took him to Riblah, and then carried him bound then to Babylon. So Riblah is here as the place where they would bring judgment to the kings. And it's mentioned in other places also. Okay, so number 2 now. Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem for 2 years, finally defeated it in what year? 586. 586 BC.
Actually, is Riblah part of the Syrian area? Or what area of the?
It's above Syria, because you see where Damascus is. It's way north even of Syria.
Okay. Wait, where's Damascus here? Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Right.
But it's north of that area. I mean, it was part of that Fertile Crescent area. Okay. All right. So another thing here that we need to say is that, and this is in the book. So look at the book here. And this is more verified by archaeological finds. Because on this page 156, do you see this ancient letter? Do you see that? What is that letter called? One of the Lachish letters. Again, so we come into the city of Lachish, and so it brings out the point, if you look on that last column on page 156, where it says, the cities of Judah suffered grievously. Okay, and who's got that? Bailey, can you continue reading from there to the rest of that chapter? On page 156, the second column where it says the cities of Judah suffered grievously, under the picture of the Lachish letter.
Okay. The cities of Judah suffered grievously, in fact attested by destruction levels at various sites. The evidence from Lachish is particularly gripping. Lachish again fell to foreign troops as it had in 701 BC. 18 Ostraka, the Lachish letters, found in the destruction of level 2, contain grim testimony to the hopeless circumstance. One letter mentions how officials watched for fire signals from Lachish because they could no longer see the beacons from nearby Azekah. Likely, Azekah already had fallen to Babylonian forces.
Okay, so put this also somewhere like under point 2. There's not, again, any, so just write this down that he used Lachish as a staging area for his final attack. So just as the Assyrian king Sennacherib had done earlier in his siege of Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar follows this same pattern. And the map again on map 78. Again, if you look at that, and if you see his third campaign, look at that green line down through Riblah and down the International Coastal Highway, and then they come down to Lachish. You see where it says, do you see Lachish there? And down below Lachish, it talks about letters from Babylon siege are found in the debris here in Lachish. So they came into Lachish, and from there they attacked Jerusalem.
Pastor, what did you say about Nebuchadnezzar again? He used Lachish
As a staging area for his final attack. Okay. And that's 2 Kings 25 and verse. Okay. Yeah, and then we mentioned again that Zedekiah was taken to Riblah. So those are really the two things there that you should know that are not necessarily right in your notes, but you've written them in. Zedekiah was taken to where? Riblah, where his eyes were put out. That's mentioned in verse 6, 2 Kings 25, verse 6. Also, it's mentioned in 2 Kings 25. Look at verse 20. Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, took these, brought them to the king of Babylon to Riblah. And the king of Babylon smote them and slew them at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah was carried away. So that's where they took various people and brought judgment to them. And then from there, they would, if they killed them, but if they didn't kill them, then they were taken into captivity at Babylon. Okay, so those are some of the key geographic points in this section. All right.
So what was the verse again? 2 Kings 25.
25:6, and then verse 20 and 21, where Riblah is mentioned.
Thank you.
Okay, then just as far as the prophets of the 7th century, what are the prophets here? Letter A, the prophet is Nahum. So you should know that Nahum wrote of the impending judgment of Nineveh. Star, Nahum, Nineveh. Zephaniah, letter B. You don't have to know anything about Zephaniah, but you have to know Habakkuk. That's letter C. What did Habakkuk say? And 3 times it's quoted in the New Testament. In Romans, Galatians, Hebrews, I think, are the 3 books that quote Habakkuk, who said what? The just shall live by faith. That's a statement from Habakkuk. So that's in your notes. Habakkuk wrote, the just shall live by faith. He also wrote of the impending doom of Babylon upon Judah. And then, of course, the weeping prophet, letter D, is Jeremiah. He lived through the good days of Josiah, through all of the deportations, and then we'll even see was carried into captivity to Babylon, to Egypt. So while he spoke harsh words of denunciation, he spoke words of hope and a future restoration of Israel. And it was Jeremiah alone that uses the phrase in the Old Testament. He uses the phrase what? The new covenant. So he's the only prophet who uses that exact phrase. So that's in your notes. And that's a good thing to know. Because actually, too, the new covenant passage of Jeremiah is quoted 2, maybe 3 times in the book of Hebrews. The Jeremiah 31 passage of the new covenant. Okay. All right, so that's the end of that chapter. So here's a little thing you can remember as well. We talked about the 3 deportations. Who was the prophet taken in the first deportation in 604? Daniel. And the prophet in the second deportation, 597? Ezekiel. So the way I remember it is D-E. I remember things alphabetically sometimes. So if that will help you, that Daniel was taken first, and then Ezekiel. D is always before. Okay. I'm just trying to help you.
Yes.
Okay.
There's no specific character that was taken in the third.
The whole nation was taken into captivity. Okay, so let's go to the next chapter of the exile. And as you look in your book, it says the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 and I'm really in your notes just quoting from the opening statement. It's a great what in Jewish history? What does it say in your book? It's a great watershed in Jewish history. And he also says that the prophets Jeremiah, that's the second blank, Ezekiel, Isaiah provide information about this time period, as well the books of Daniel, Ezra, Haggai, Zechariah do as well, of a nation in exile. So basically the book, this is a very short chapter. Look how short this chapter is. It is, compared to the other chapters we've been, this is like 5 pages. So he just breaks down the different Jewish communities that then are going to move into exile. So the first section here, he talks about Judah in exile, the community of Judah. The conditions in Judah, of course, because of the sieges, especially against Jerusalem, they were, what does it say I'm on page 159 in your book. The community in Judah, the conditions were severe. Do you see the notes? Where does everybody have that page? Do I have enough pages?
Page 20. Everybody has 20?
Yes, I'm sorry. We are on a new page. We need pages 20 and 21. Do you have it? Okay. Does everybody have it? Okay. So, watershed is the first blank. Jeremiah, the third blank. The community in Judah, conditions in Judah were severe. Now, Jeremiah, go to Jeremiah, please, chapter 40. Who was appointed governor by Nebuchadnezzar in, I don't know even know what you call it because Judah's taken into account. We'll call it Judah, Israel. Who was appointed governor in Judah at this time? Jeremiah chapter 40 and verse 5 is his name, Gedaliah. Gedaliah. So write his name down. Now, Gedaliah was not of royal lineage, and that no doubt was part of Nebuchadnezzar's strategy. He didn't want to put somebody with the king's seed in the line of the Judah kings, like David, as the leader, as the governor of that region. So he put Gedaliah. There was a man who was of that royal seed. His name is Ishmael, and that's in Jeremiah chapter 41, verse 1. And basically what's going to happen here, letter B, I know I'm skipping a blank, but we're going to get that blank. But letter B is Gedaliah is going to be assassinated by Ishmael, backed by the Ammonite king. So let's look at this for just a moment. Gedaliah was appointed governor by Nebuchadnezzar. He established his court. If you look in Jeremiah chapter 40, verse 7, where is Gedaliah's capital? Not Jerusalem. What's happened to Jerusalem? It's been destroyed, burned to the ground. So he establishes his capital in Mizpah. And that's in verse 8. Then they came to Gedaliah to Mizpah. And look what's going to happen here, actually. So the kingdom has been truly devastated, but once Gedaliah is appointed, he's going to bring some level of stability in the midst of great devastation. And so in verse 10, why don't we just read verse 10 and 11 and 12, if we could do that. Do we have those verses? Micah, could we start here? And then we'll just go around and just each read a verse. Sure. If you could read beginning at verse 10.
Jeremiah 40, 10.
Yep.
As for me, behold, I will dwell in Mizpah to serve the Chaldeans, which will come on unto us. But ye, gather ye wine and summer fruits and oil, and put them in your vessels, and dwell in your cities that ye have taken.
Yeah.
Likewise, when all the Jews that were in Moab, and among the Ammonites, and in Edom, and that were in all the countries, heard that the king of Babylon had left a remnant of Judah, and that he had set over them Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan.
Okay, Ellie?
Then all the Jews returned out of all places where they had been driven and came to the land of Judah to Gedaliah and Mizpah and gathered wine and summer fruit in abundance.
Okay, so look at your map here on page 79. So when we hit those verses like verse 11, that's a rich verse for our class because it mentions a lot of different places. So what's happening here? Gedaliah is providing some level of strength and a coming back even of stability. He said, gather fruit, come, I'm the leader. And so what happens? The Jews that had scattered to where? What is it? What places? Verse 11. Moab. You see Moab on your map, map 79. So they came from Moab to Gedaliah. And they came from where? Ammon. And so they came back from Ammon and then Edom. And Edom is where in relationship to Moab? I know some of you will never forget that. Okay. Edom is south of Moab. So they came out of Edom and they went back. So they were going back. And they returned. It says they were returning and they were gathering wine and summer fruits. But look at verse 14. And this is also mentioned in your notes now under letter B. And Jenny, do you have that verse or do you have verse 14 handy? If you could read that, please.
And said to him, do you certainly know that Baalis, the king of the Ammonites, has sent Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah, to murder you? But Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, did not believe him.
Okay, so who is leading this assassination attempt? Okay, Ishmael, but who's behind Ishmael? Baalis, the king of the Ammonites. You know, even there's, a few years ago, there was some kind of a terrorist attack. And I remember Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, said, whenever there's any kind of a terrorist attack, there's always a government, a foreign government behind that attack. So if it seems like there's some kind of random bomb blowing off, you know, somewhere in a ship in the Gulf region, there's a government that's funding it. So in this situation, it's kind of the same thing going on. There's a government behind this assassination attempt of Gedaliah in order to disrupt the coming stability, because we just read how the Jews were coming back, and so they were going to gather fruits. They were getting a harvest, and so get back to some kind of normalcy in the midst of great destruction. But even that, the Ammonites don't want that. They don't want any normalcy. They don't want stability there. It's better for them if there was instability. So that's what Baalis is interested in. And so he sends Ishmael to kill Gedaliah. Gedaliah is warned by Johanan, and he doesn't listen. He doesn't listen. So Gedaliah is assassinated by Ishmael, and that story is then told in chapter 41. Then what happens, letter C, Johanan and the others take Jeremiah against his better counsel. Remember, there's a whole story. They come to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, whatever you tell us to do, we're going to do it. We promise. Pretty please, just tell us what God says, and we'll do it. We really will this time, Jeremiah. And so Jeremiah says, okay, don't go to Egypt. Oh, well, we would do everything except that. We're going. So no matter what. So that's letter C. Flee to Egypt. And in Egypt, you can write 3 words. They were dense or forgetful of the very reason of their destruction in the first place, because they went down to Egypt and just carried out even worse idolatrous acts down in Egypt. They were defiant against God. Jeremiah 44:16. What's the last phrase of Jeremiah 44:16? When Jeremiah was preaching to them, what was their response to Jeremiah? 44:16, last phrase. What does it say? We will not listen to what you're telling us. And they were in denial of everything of what had caused their destruction in the first place, because when they went down to Egypt, who did they worship? Jeremiah 44:17 is one of the verses, but also verse 19, they went to worship who? The Queen of Heaven, which they had done in Jerusalem, which had brought the destruction. So they went right back to their old sins. So God says to this remnant in Egypt that they are going to be destroyed, that they would be destroyed. And that's in Jeremiah 44 and verse 29 and other places. Well, look at 44:13. He says in 44:13, I will punish them that dwell in the land of Egypt. And in 44:29, he says, I will punish you in this place, that you may know that my word shall surely stand. So that was the destiny of really the remnant of the Jewish people who went down into Egypt. They went back into idolatry, forgetful of God, repeated past sins, and God punished them in Egypt. Now, where did they go in Egypt? If you look in your map here, so you see on map 79, there's just a red line. It says they went down into Egypt. But if you look at map number 81, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what I'm doing. So let me not do that. Okay. And we really need to stop this. But
Yes.
you want to stop? Is it too much? Too much for your brain? Okay. So let's stop right there so you don't have to know any more for the test. How about that? Okay, so this is too many names, but that Gedaliah was appointed what? Governor, and he was assassinated by Ishmael. And then Jeremiah was taken into Egypt. And let me just kind of throw this in though. This you don't have to know it, but it is in the Bible. And I just like these things in the Bible. I really do when these points of geography are in the Bible. Look at the last thing. You don't have to know this for the test, but I just like it. So I'm gonna. So look at Jeremiah chapter 44, verse 1. It says there, the word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews which dwell in the land of Egypt, which dwell at, here it is. Here's the geography. Where? Migdol. Now look at your map, number 81, map 81. Find Migdol. It's the northern region of Egypt. You see Migdol, and there's a white box right there as well. Okay, so there's Migdol. And then it says, and at Tahpanhes. Do you see Tahpanhes right next to Migdol? And at Noph, go down a little bit. Noph, also Memphis. And then he says, watch this, a general region in the country of Pathros. Find Pathros. That's way down in the southern region of Egypt. So that tells us where the exiles, when they went down into Egypt, they went way down south. They went deep into idolatry, and then they experienced the judgment of God when they were in Egypt. That is not going to be the consequence of the exiles that went to Babylon. So we'll continue that next week. Okay?
Pastor, there's no map for the test.
Oh.